What should not be mapped? Imagine this. A man who knew every tree, every curve, every sound of that forest vanishes without a trace. He wasn't reckless. He didn't make a mistake. He didn't ignore the signs. And yet he disappeared, as if the mountain itself had swallowed him. Now, imagine something even more disturbing. His body is found 8 miles from the site of his disappearance, with both legs broken, unable to walk a single meter, yet perfectly aligned on top of an inaccessible hill, as if he had been placed there with care. Around him, a perfect circle of charred grass, no fire, no ashes, no explanation. The ground still warm days later, and the rescue dogs refuse to go near. This is not an ordinary disappearance case. It is an enigma that defies logic, science, and even time. A case so strange that the U.S. National Park Service itself closed the area forever, and to this day does not publicly comment on what really happened. But there is something even more unsettling. Old maps of the region show that ravine as a blank space, with only 2 words handwritten in faded ink: not mapped. In this story, you will discover why some places should not be explored, why certain mysteries don't ask for answers, and why sometimes the greatest act of courage is not to investigate, but to respect. Stay until the end, because what happened to Ronald Bishop isn't just about a man who disappeared. It's about what happens when the world we know encounters something that refuses to be understood. And perhaps you will never look at a forest the same way again. What should not be mapped? In the spring of 1988, the Great Smoky Mountains seemed to breathe differently. The morning mists descended from the slopes not as a simple weather phenomenon, but as if they carried memory. They enveloped pines, oaks, and rocks in damp cloaks that resisted the sun until almost noon. The birds sang less near the Porter Creek ravine. Even the deer avoided its boundaries. It was as if the forest itself knew that something ancient rested there. Ronald Bishop had been a park ranger for 15 years. At 38, he knew every curve, stream, and cliff in that territory. He was respected not for bravery, but for method. He had never violated protocol, never underestimated the weather, never ignored a sign. He lived with his wife Susan and their 2 children in a simple house on the outskirts of Gatlinburg, a few kilometers from the park's east entrance. His colleagues described him as the kind of man who made the impossible seem routine. The night before his disappearance, Bishop had dinner at home. His 9-year-old daughter drew an imaginary map of the park. In the lower left corner, she scribbled a dark area with the caption, "Here live those who do not speak." Bishop laughed, ruffled her hair, and said tenderly, "Forests don't have a soul, sweetheart. They have rules, and we respect them." Susan didn't laugh. She remembered the encounter, weeks before, between Bishop and the Cherokee elder Joseph Two Trees at the town fair. The old man, without provocation, had said in a low voice, "There are places that don't accept curious eyes. Only those who know how to ask permission enter and leave whole." Bishop thanked him with a courteous nod but didn't respond. That night, Susan asked if he believed in that. He replied, "I believe in falls, snakes, hypothermia. The rest is stories to calm fear." On the morning of July 9th, the heat was already pressing down on the air before 7. Bishop arrived at the park's east station with his light backpack, radio, water bottle, notebook, pen, first aid kit, pocket knife, and whistle. He wore his summer uniform, short-sleeved shirt, khaki pants, hiking boots. He checked his route with dispatcher James Collins, briefly discussed the forecast of 32 degrees Celsius with high humidity, and confirmed his return for 5 p.m. Before leaving, he looked for a moment towards the ravine that descended beyond Porter Creek, a deep cut in the mountain, covered by vegetation so dense that even the birds seemed to avoid flying over it. At 11:20 a.m., Bishop reported passing the first checkpoint. All normal. At 1:15 p.m., he reported finding traces of an unauthorized campfire at the second campsite. Nothing serious. At 3:40 p.m., his voice came over the radio for the last time, with slight interference. There's smoke, or maybe steam, rising from the ravine about 400 meters from here. I'm going down to check. Copy. Report back in 30 minutes, replied Collins. Affirmative. 30 minutes passed, then 60. Then nothing. At 6 p.m., the East Sector Chief Thomas Wilson authorized the first search team. 4 rangers followed the trail to the point where Bishop had left the main route. They found broken branches, clear footprints in the damp earth, and then, suddenly, nothing. As if he had been lifted from the ground. No signs beyond that point, no scratches, no overturned leaves, just the thick silence of the forest. The next day, sniffer dogs were brought in. They smelled Bishop's shirt and followed the trail confidently to the same spot. There they stopped. They backed away. One of them howled softly as if sensing a presence. The handler, a 25-year veteran, just murmured, "I've never seen this." They didn't lose the scent. They refused to follow it. Meanwhile, in a discreet meeting at the administrative post, Wilson received an unexpected visitor. Joseph Two Trees. Uninvited, the elder entered, sat down and said, "You are looking for a body, but he is not lost. He has been returned." "Returned to what?" Wilson asked cautiously. "To the one who carries the heat, Atsula. The ravine is an ancient grave. No one enters there without asking. Your man saw the fire that does not burn. Now he belongs to the place." Wilson didn't respond. But that night, while reviewing the park's old maps, the ones made before its official founding, the ones sketched by hunters and missionaries, he noticed something. The Porter Ravine had never been named. On all the maps, it appeared as a white void, surrounded by a faint line and the annotation in faded ink, "Not mapped." The search continued for weeks. Helicopters swept the valleys. Drones flew over the cliffs. Volunteers scoured every cave. Nothing. Until, on the morning of August 8th, a couple of tourists found the body on top of the hill known as Bear's Head, 8 miles north of the ravine. What they saw defied the logic of the mountain. Bishop was lying on his back, arms at his sides, as if he had been placed there with care. His boots were tied. His legs, broken in several places, femur and tibia, were aligned with his torso, as if someone had arranged them after death. Around him, a perfect circle of charred grass and moss, but no ashes, no embers, no smell of burning. The trees at the edges had bark blackened up to 1.5 meters from the ground, but the leaves were green and intact. The ground beneath the body was still warm, 3 degrees above the local average, even after days of exposure. The medical examiner, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, noted the impossible. High-energy fractures without corresponding bruising, extreme dehydration, but an empty stomach for less than a day. And, strangest of all, decomposition was slow, as if time had flowed differently there. The cause of death was listed as traumatic shock, combined with severe heat stroke, but the internal report contained an observation suppressed from the public version. Localized thermal exposure of unidentifiable origin. Recommend not reopening the Porter Ravine Trail. The official version was released 2 weeks later. Accident during patrol. Fall, disorientation due to heat, death by exposure. Case closed. The family received compensation. The case filed away. But behind the scenes, everything changed. The ravine trail was closed for maintenance and never reopened. Rangers began avoiding patrolling alone near that area. When they need to check the boundaries, they go in groups, only during the day. Some report, in private conversations, having seen at dusk a yellowish, diffuse light moving among the trees. Not like fire, but like incandescent mist. Others swear they suddenly felt the air heat up 10 degrees in seconds, with no wind, no explanation. Months later, members of the Cherokee tribe held a ceremony on the hilltop where the body was found. Joseph Two Trees spread sacred tobacco around the charred circle and murmured words in his ancestral language. At the end, he told the park representatives, "This place must not be touched, nor studied, nor mapped. Leave it in peace." In 2003, a young, newly arrived ranger asked Wilson, already retired but still visiting the station, why that ravine was forbidden. The old man looked at the mountains in the distance, where the mist was beginning to rise, and replied, "Because some places don't want to be known. They only want to be respected." That night, the young ranger, on his way home, stopped at the boundary of the closed area. He saw among the trees a small pile of stones, a Cherokee offering. He hesitated. Then he picked up a smooth stone from the creek and placed it on top of the pile. He said nothing. He just bowed his head and moved on. Since then, the park's official maps continue to show that ravine as a blank space. No trail, no name. Just a faint, almost invisible line. And in small letters in the lower corner, "Not mapped, not accessible." Tourists ask why the trail is closed. The rangers respond with evasions: erosion, ecological recovery, landslide danger. No one mentions the charred circle. No one speaks of the body aligned like an offering. No one says that on certain nights, the mist in the Porter Ravine glows with a light that comes from nowhere. But everyone knows, and everyone respects it. Because the deepest truth is not in what disappeared, but in what we choose not to disturb. Some mysteries don't need to be solved. They only need to be honored. Have you ever stopped to think that, perhaps, not everything needs to be explained? That some things exist precisely to remind us that the world is bigger than our understanding? The story of Ronald Bishop does not end with an answer. It ends with a silence, with a blank map, with a pile of stones beside a trail closed for over 30 years. And perhaps that is exactly what makes it so powerful. If this story left you unsettled, if you felt that chill down your spine imagining the charred circle, or if you wondered what was really in that ravine, then it has served its purpose. Because it's not about fear of the unknown, but respect for it. Leave in the comments. Do you believe there are places that simply should not be explored? Or do you think that one day, science will explain even what seems impossible today? If you made it this far, it wasn't by chance. Share this video with someone who also feels that sometimes the mystery is more important than the answer. And subscribe, because there are many stories like this out there, stories that challenge what we know and invite us to look at the world with a little more humility. Until next time. And remember, not everything needs to be mapped. Some places only ask that we pass by them in silence.